This is going to cause some controversy. It's the Premier League review for the 2023-24 campaign. Hey guys, welcome to the channel. Welcome to another video. Yes, today's video is going to centre around the review for the Premier League season of 2023-24. I usually do these kinds of videos. I talk about the teams and review their seasons and everything else that goes along with that. So here today is that video. We're going to be reviewing the Premier League season that has been and gone and finished yesterday with, of course, Manchester City being Premier League champions, Liverpool, Arsenal, and of course, phenomenally Aston Villa gaining Champions League football, Europa League football going to Tottenham and Chelsea, and Europa Conference League football going to Newcastle, whilst of course the new promoted sides of this season in Luton, Burnley and Sheffield United will unfortunately for them be going back down to the Championship after being confirmed as being relegated, and of course every single team in between. But before we go any further in talking about the reviews, and obviously this tier grade system that we've got here, talking about the season that was for each and every single team and grading their final positions, I would like to remind you all to please like the video and also subscribe if you're new. Both of them is always very greatly appreciated. Get involved in the comment section. Let me know your thoughts, your comments, opinions, predictions, feelings, whatever you want to call it in regards to this down below. And obviously I'm sure you'll have a lot of interesting thoughts and comments and opinions on everything to do with the Premier League review for the 2023-24 campaign. So without further ado, let's get into it, and let's start with the relegated sides first. We're going to go from bottom to top. So rock bottom, Sheffield United instantly into the F zone, the F tier. Failure to do what they set out to do this season, which was stay up. I know a lot of people expected them to go down this season, so by that kind of logic, they have achieved exactly what a lot of people thought of them this season. But for them, they of course wanted to stay up. But when you don't have enough quality in the final third, you don't have enough quality in midfield, you don't have enough quality defensively, to the point where you're conceding over 100 goals, you don't deserve to stay up. And I know it's hard, I know it's tough for newly promoted sides, especially with FFP tightening its grip on the Premier League and everything. But I think Sheffield United were pretty much down before a ball was even kicked, to be honest, unfortunately for them. And I think a lot of their fans will admit it as well, that they were pretty much down and out before a ball was even kicked, unfortunately for them. If you want to know more about Sheffield United and of course our next team of Burnley, go back and check out the videos that I did on both of them on the channel. Burnley also moving to the F tier, and Luton I'm going to put into the E tier. Now the reason I put Luton in the E tier is because I felt like out of the three newly promoted sides, they're the only one who put up a real fight this season to try and survive. Sheffield United I think were down pretty much before they were out. Burnley were treating the Premier League like it was the Championship for large parts of the campaign, and they only started to put together a few results towards the end of the campaign, but by then for them it was too little too late. They didn't have enough quality in the final third to put the ball into the back of the net, and at times just didn't have enough quality overall to sort of do anything in key games that were probably more favourable to Burnley to pick up points in. For Luton, I don't remember many times they got absolutely put to the sword. I don't remember too many times where a team absolutely thrashed them. There may be the odd few occasions. I think they lost 5-0 to Brentford, I think they lost like 6-1 or something to Manchester City. I think maybe there was a couple more games in there than which they got absolutely hammered. But I don't remember a lot, and I do remember a lot more fight being put up by Luton than any of the other two sides that got relegated. So I think for that, I think I just award them an E. But I think for the large part, I think a lot more was expected of Burnley overall. Sheffield United and Luton were destined to go down from the beginning, but I think a lot more people had a lot more expectations of Burnley to maybe be the one that survives out of the three. But of course that wasn't to be, and even with points deductions happening to two of the close rivals and obviously fellow relegation candidates in the Premier League, neither one of these three teams could obviously survive the relegation threat. So they'll be going back down next season. We obviously wait and see what happens for the future of them three. Next up, Nottingham Forest. Now, I'm going to move them into the E tier. Reason why is because I think for me personally, I was expecting a lot more progression from Forest this season than what we got. We started off the season with Steve Cooper, and now we're finishing it with Nuno Espirito Santo. I was expecting a lot more progression. I was expecting a season in which, okay, you've had to sign about 50 million players to obviously accommodate for the ones that you lost via contract renewal or contracts running out, loan deals expiring, like blah 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 blah. You brought in 50 million players. Last season, you survived by hook or by crook. You survived. Your home form was a big part of that. Now this season, it's time to kick on again and to survive again. Improve your away form, maintain your home form as a fortress, and kick on. They didn't really do that this season. They got rid of Steve Cooper. They eventually rolled the dice on a new manager. They brought in a Nuno Espirito Santo. And I think it's telling that they only just survived even with a points deduction, because I still think they would have survived anyway with Steve Cooper. But it says a lot that they took that sideward step in management, in my personal opinion. Got Nuno Espirito Santo and still managed to survive by being the fourth worst team in the Premier League. Now, that's all you need to be at this stage. You just need to survive by being the fourth worst team, and that is exactly what happened with Forest here. But again, I think the lack of progression has really been telling this season for Forest, and it's going to be interesting to see if Nuno Espirito Santo stays. It's going to be interesting to see if they can get some consistency behind them. It's going to be interesting to see what happens next season with Forest, because, you know, there's a couple of good players in there that I think a lot of bigger teams may be looking at. And if they manage to take them off their hands, I know it hasn't exactly been a nice season for Forest in terms of they've felt a bit hard done by certain VAR calls and certain official calls. They could have got a few more points if obviously certain VAR calls were given in their favour, as they probably should have been. But even so, footballing wise, needs to be a bit more progression, in my personal opinion, going forward. Brentford, they can also go into the E tier. Again, maybe a bit harsh, but they've been underwhelming this season. They've underperformed. Surviving is one thing, but there's been no maintenance or maintaining their standing from the previous season. Previous season, they recorded a 9th place finish. Big for Brentford. Massive for Thomas Frank. But this season, they obviously felt the loss of Ivan Toney for the first half of the season. And even in the second half of the season, I don't think he kicked on with the kind of return that I think a lot of Bees fans and I think a lot of people at Brentford were hoping for. Maybe his head was already turned by the likes of transfer speculation and maybe a potential move to other clubs. Maybe that turned his head, and maybe that's why he didn't quite hit the races or was firing on all cylinders as much as people were hoping for. But Brentford survived. I personally think they've hit the end of the road with Thomas Frank. I personally feel like new and fresh ideas are needed at that club. I think some new faces are needed at that club as well. But he can leave with his head held high. He did incredible to maintain their Premier League status for a couple of seasons after initially getting them there in the first place. Is nothing to be sniffed at whatsoever. I think he did a very good job, Thomas Frank. But I just feel like maybe some new direction may be needed for this club. I know that obviously they had a lot to deal with injury-wise and things of that nature, and I know a lot of other teams have had to deal with the same thing. But yeah, I'm an admirer of Thomas Frank. I like him as a character. I like him as a football manager. I like the style he plays. But again, I just feel like maybe they've hit the end of the road there, Brentford, with Frank as their manager. They survive, fantastic, but they survive similarly to Forest by being the 5th worst team in the Premier League for a large part. Next, Everton. I'm moving them to the C tier for Everton. They achieved exactly what we expected them to this season. They survived, even with a couple of points deductions against them. They managed to still survive. They managed to obviously maintain their Premier League status. And yeah, I think think that's basically it as far as what Everton are concerned. They did what was set out of them to, and congratulations to Sean Dyche for that. Obviously, towards the end of the campaign, that was really where they started to shine. That's really where they picked up the majority of their momentum, including, of course, in there a massive Merseyside derby win against Liverpool, which Everton fans absolutely revelled in. But it has been an up and down season for Toffees fans. It has been a season of anger and frustration, mainly at their own club, sort of at the Premier League as well. But I feel like the majority should be aimed at their own club for the poor way that they have been ran these past several years, to get them to a point where not only are they breaching FFP and PSR regulations, but also to a point where they're scraping by season, relegation by relegation. Saying that though, if it hadn't been for the overall 8-point deduction overall that Everton received for 2 breaches of FFP, I think they would have got somewhere between 11th and 12th, I believe, if memory serves me correctly. So it would have been a better season for Everton, and all things considered, had their club been not run so poorly that they breached FFP. But still, a very good season for Everton in terms of staying up. A good season in which to look at for next season as a platform to build upon for Sean Dyche. Yeah, I don't think Everton fans can have too many complaints about the league positioning overall. But I'm sure there's a lot in-house at Everton that obviously does not sit right for a large number of Toffee fans. Wolves, I'm going to say C. Now, I could move them higher, but I think C is about where they deserve to be. I think a lot of people were expecting them to survive relegation this season. I don't think a lot of people are expecting Gary O'Neill to do as good a job as what he did, though. I think him being thrown into the deep end right at the beginning of the season, a couple of days before a ball was even kicked of the brand new campaign, I think a lot of question marks are being raised over Wolves' readiness to take on the season. Julian Lopetegui leaving so soon before the season was set to kick off. Gary O'Neill coming in, being chucked right into the deep end. But no, I like Gary O'Neill. I like what he's done. I think he's surprised a lot of people. I like the way that he plays football. I like the way that obviously he's got this team playing together. I think Wolves' season did dip off a little bit at the end. And I think as well as that, they are unfortunate not to have accumulated a few more points here and there across the campaign through some seriously dodgy and unfortunate VAR and refereeing calls that have obviously hurt Wolves enough for them to be the spearhead of a proposal to scrap VAR for future seasons to come. So we'll see what happens on that discussion later on down the line. But yes, Wolves have essentially been shafted a little bit by VAR a fair few times this season, which has stopped them from maybe having a better season than what they already have done. I still think it's a good season. I still think it's a good platform to build upon. I like Gary O'Neill. I like the football he plays. I like how he carries himself as a person and as a manager. So I think Wolves have got a lot to look forward to with him, and it'll be interesting to see how they do going forward. Next up, Bournemouth, I believe. We're going to go Bournemouth. And I'm going B for Bournemouth. Ironically, how you spell it. Or how you begin to spell it. Yeah. I put Bournemouth to go down at the beginning of the season. And I hold my hands up on this. And I say to you, I was wrong about Bournemouth. I was wrong about them getting rid of Gary O'Neill. I was wrong about them bringing in Areola. I was wrong about them being relegated. On all 3 accounts, strike 1, strike 2, strike 3, you're out. I messed up on Bournemouth a lot this season. Areola's done a fantastic job. He has done better than what a lot of people, including obviously myself, had predicted. He has been brilliant, his squad have been brilliant, and he has managed to turn Dominic Solanke into a bit of a goal-scoring machine across the season. Solanke's enjoyed his most prolific season to date, and I'm sure that is going to be a massive building block, not just in terms of overall team performance, but of course personally for him to build upon for the next campaign. I think Bournemouth have got a few decent players in there. I think they play some very good football. I think the only thing you can really criticise Bournemouth for is sometimes they concede stupid goals. But at the other end of the pitch, if Solanke's not firing on all cylinders, they don't really have a consistent backup to Solanke to score them kinds of goals. And I do feel this season that they played some good football, but they didn't finish off the chances when they were presented to them. Similarly to Wolves in a way. I think one thing I did not mention about Wolves is the fact that they play some good stuff, but don't necessarily finish the chances. Bournemouth are a little bit the same. If Solanke's not firing on all cylinders, they don't necessarily get the goals that match the kind of play, if you know what I mean. So I think Bournemouth have done very well. I think it's a good building block to build off for future seasons to come. But yes, I think the one criticism is not enough maybe goals from elsewhere, or not enough on at least a consistent level to maybe rival and match Solanke for the good play that they produce. Yeah, they are a decent footballing side, Bournemouth, and like I say, I think they've surprised many this season with just how well they have done. Next up, Fulham. This may seem harsh. I'm moving Fulham into the E tier. I am moving Fulham into the E tier. This may be harsh, but there have been times this season where I have forgot that Fulham are even a Premier League side. And I'm not even joking when I say that. They have gone so much under the radar this season, and that's not necessarily a bad thing either. That just to me is personally a bad thing. They have seemingly gone so much under the radar this season that I forgot they even necessarily existed. They finished round about middle of the table, middle of the road kind of finish. I was expecting a drop off from last season, and they kind of achieved what I expected. So maybe by that logic, I could maybe move them into the C tier for achieving what I expected of them this season. But they have gone so much under the radar this season, and I feel like certain decisions haven't exactly gone to plan. Maybe the signing of Raul Jimenez hasn't quite kicked on in the way that they were hoping for to replace Alexander Mitrovic. They still play some decent football at times, and I guess across the season they've been involved in some pretty good matches. I think they took 4 points out of 6 against Arsenal. I think they gave a couple of the other big clubs a run for their money. I know that they obviously lost 4-3 to Liverpool in a very exciting 7-goal thriller earlier on in the campaign. I know they made it to a Carabao Cup semi-final. But overall, in terms of Premier League, drop off from last... You know what? I'll move them to D. I feel like E's a bit harsh. I'll move them to D. The more I think about it, going under the radar is not necessarily a bad thing. They have had a bit of a drop off from the previous season where they first came back up to the Premier League. But yeah, I feel like D is the right kind of grade for them, in all honesty. Difficult one. Moving on to Brighton, and I'm going to move them into the D tier again. I'm going to move them alongside Fulham because 11th place finish may not be the end of the world for a Brighton side that has had a lot to deal with this season, but it is still a bit of a downgrade from obviously the previous campaign and previous campaigns, should I say, of progression that Brighton have been on. 11th place finish is nothing to be sniffed at, but at the same time, scratch beneath the surface and you understand why. A lot of injuries have occurred, a lot of other things have happened at Brighton, and I ultimately think as well, De Zerbi's reputation that has been ever fastly so growing whilst being Brighton manager may have been a bit of a distraction for a lot of those players, himself, people at Brighton, whatever it may be. Because sometimes it is, and that's not me making excuses for them, that is me seeing it in a lot of other clubs, not just Brighton down the years, but a lot of other clubs, and just saying that maybe it was all a distraction and why Brighton ultimately faltered. Yes, everybody deals with injuries, but some can handle it better than others, and of course the bigger club that you are, the more capable you are at handling it to an extent. Brighton had a lot of injuries, a lot of long-term ones, a few short-term nagging ones. And they dealt with it, I think, in the best way that they could. But it was like patching up an old car that was always going to break down fully eventually. And that's exactly what I think Brighton's season had occurred towards the end of the campaign. So, yeah, 11th place finish is a drop off from last season in them obtaining Europa League football. And that's another thing as well. Them having to play Europa League football and balance Europa League and domestic league at the same time, which, of course, is very difficult, especially for a side that's never quite done that before. So I always felt like it was going to be a difficult struggle for Brighton this season. But yeah, I still think they did pretty well. I still think De Zerbi is a decent enough manager. I think he is more style over substance, admittedly. But I still think he's a decent enough manager. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens now, of course, because obviously De Zerbi may be leaving Brighton. So it's going to be interesting. But one thing we know about Brighton is they probably have already drawn up some replacements. And usually their recruitment isn't far from being wrong. So it'll be interesting times lie ahead for Brighton at the Amex. Interesting times really do lie ahead. But they will be annoyed that their rivals in Crystal Palace managed to achieve a 10th place finish because of the resurgence of Oliver Glasner towards the end of the campaign, and I'm going to put them in the C tier. Mainly because I think the end of their season counters the beginning of their season, so it somewhat meets in the middle. Now, I was expecting Palace to finish mid-table regardless, but of course, under Roy Hodgson, it didn't seem like things were heading in that direction from the get-go. It was only until Roy Hodgson left the club and they brought in Glasner, which I think was a fantastic appointment and I think is a real steal of an appointment, a shrewd piece of business by Palace to obtain a manager his standards and obviously his sort of calibre as of right now. I like it. I like it a lot from what I've seen of Crystal Palace in these past couple of months, and I really do feel like next season they could be a bit of a surprise package if they continue on this upwards trajectory that Glasner's taken them on. I mean, let's face it, look at what he's done so far with some of those players in the Crystal Palace ranks, likes of is it Adam Wharton? Ward? I hope I'm pronouncing that name right. He's English after all, but I don't remember if that's how you pronounce his name. The young midfielder who's obviously made a breakthrough this season. Obviously, Palace have a fair few decent young prospects and young players in their ranks. So it'll be interesting to see if Glasner can obviously continue to maintain them players in the transfer market. We know there are some big sharks out there that may be looking for certain players, and Palace may fit the bill because they also have the likes of Michael Olise, who has been brilliant towards the end of the season. Eze, of course, looking very, very good and very comfortable in a Crystal Palace shirt right now. And of course, Mateta, who is on fire right now. The guy can't stop scoring. It's incredible that he has managed to turn Mateta into a goal-scoring machine towards the end of the campaign. It's been incredible to watch for Crystal Palace. I'm hoping it does actually continue from afar, just because I like seeing underdog teams like that kind of, raise their game and obviously raise their level. So that's going to be interesting to see. But yeah, I'm very much looking forward to seeing the continuation of Crystal Palace and seeing how they continue to rise. And like I say, I think with a few decent tactical tweaks and I think with a few decent additions in the transfer window, they certainly could be an early shout for one to watch for next season. Next up, West Ham. I've gone with a C, middle of the road kind of table for Mr. Consistency himself in David Moyes. Of course, having to balance Europa League football with domestic football again is no easy task, but I think this season he's done pretty well. Again, it's a bit of an inconsistent mixture for West Ham. When they were good, they were very good, and when they were bad, they were very, very bad. I feel like Jared Bowen has been very consistent this season in a very good sense of the word. And I also feel like Mohamed Kudus has been an absolutely incredible signing for West Ham, and I'm looking forward to seeing his development continue over the course of many seasons to come. I think he's been very, very good. I think he's been a solid piece of business for West Ham. And I think overall West Ham pretty much achieved what I think a lot of people were expecting them to achieve, which was about a middle of the table kind of finish. Unfortunately for them, no European football for next season. But I think as far as a send-off for David Moyes goes, 9th place finish for West Ham, and with them entering now into the somewhat unknown of Julian Lopetegui for the next campaign, it's going to be interesting. Going to be interesting times that lie ahead at the London Stadium. So I've gone with a C tier finish for them. Now, we enter the top 6. No, we don't. Top 8, sorry. Manchester United. I'm putting them in the F tier. A team like Manchester United to not achieve any kind of European football is unacceptable. Now, of course, that can change if they win the FA Cup this weekend. If they win the FA Cup this weekend and they beat Manchester City, they will not only win a trophy, they will not only have bragging rights over their closest rivals, but they will also be in next season's Europa League. That could be huge for United on 3 accounts. But of course, until then, I have no idea if they will win it or not. I have a strong feeling, I have an inkling that they're going to lose it. I have a feeling that City will win it on Saturday. But of course, stranger things have happened, and cup finals are strange places, particularly when they are against fierce rivals. But for me, Manchester United to not obtain any kind of European football is a failure. And that's why I move it into the F tier. It may seem a little harsh, but United have been relying on vibes and individual moments this season. The tactics of Erik ten Hag have been all over the place. His words are becoming more and more delusional. There has been no progression or stability from his first season in charge of United to the point where he's maintained Champions League football. The only consistency he's had is maintaining yet another FA Cup final. Whether or not he wins it or not remains to be seen. In my opinion, highly unlikely. But for them to finish 8th outside of any form of European football, including the Europa Conference League, is failure for Man United. Absolute failure. And that is why I have put them in the F tier. Look, 8th place may still be somewhat respectable, and particularly for a United side that has had so many issues and problems this season. They've been an absolute car crash for the majority of it. But even so, 8th place is not acceptable. Outside of any form of European football is unacceptable. And United this season have ultimately failed. And that's why they deserve to be in the F tier. Simple as that. Newcastle United, I'm going to go C or D. C or D. I'm going to go C. I'm going to go C. They obtained Europa Conference League football for next season, and I think that is really where they are at right now. I think with a Newcastle side that have dealt with so much this season in terms of, so many injuries to key players. Sandro Tonali, their star signing, obviously being banned from playing football for various breaches of betting laws. And maybe, having to play Champions League football for the first few games of the season, or first few months, should I say, of the season. Balancing that for the first time in over 20 odd years. It was a big season for Newcastle. And I think them getting Europa Conference League football is somewhat right in a way. They get something out of it. They get another building block to put in the foundations of their long-term project to build upon. And I think it'll do the players a world of good as well. I think they had a bit of Champions League experience this season in the group stages. Fine, fair enough. It is what it is. And then next season, they can look at, okay, we'll make do with what we've got. A Europa Conference League in which they should be considerably strong favourites for. It could be big for Newcastle next season. That genuinely could be huge for Newcastle next season. And definitely something that I think will be very interesting to watch as far as what the Magpies are concerned. Because when you look back at the season a couple of seasons ago, in which they finished in the top four, in which they got Champions League football, they overachieved so much that season that I think this season has somewhat balanced it out a little bit. And now they're reaching in the middle. So I do like what Eddie Howe is continuing to do. I think that he's done brilliantly to say that he's obviously had to deal with so much this season. I think the form of the likes of Alexander Isak have been nothing short of spectacular. I like everything that they're doing right now. Can they keep hold of some of their key players? Only time will tell. But I think the Europa Conference League will do them the world of good next season. And I think it is a big opportunity that they should grasp with both hands, to say the least. Next up, Chelsea. I've gone with C tier. C for Chelsea. Again, that's how you begin to spell Chelsea. A disastrous start. A disastrous middle. But then they pulled it back at the end. And they're going to be in Europa League football for next season. And I think that is where they deserve to be. And I think that's what I predicted at the beginning of the season for the Blues. And I think this would also, similarly to Newcastle, will do them the world of good as well. I think this will do Chelsea the world of good. They've got a very young squad. They've got a squad that is building, that is getting more and more united together by the game. You've got Pochettino, a manager who is getting used to his squad, as well as his squad getting used to each other, as well as the manager getting used to the way that that he wants to play, getting used to the way that he wants them to play. I think a car crashy season has ended in the best possible way for Chelsea to set up consistency and sustainability for seasons to come. I've backed Pochettino a lot this season. I've been a big defender of Pochettino a lot. I haven't completely defended him to the extent of delusion. I've not completely defended him when, of course, he needed to take some sort of criticism for certain things he was doing, like playing players out of position, making certain subs, whatever the case may be. But I saw Chelsea in need of sustainability and consistency, and that is exactly what Pochettino should now bring. And that's why the Chelsea board should back him. That's why the fans should back him. And, obtaining Europa League football, I think, is a good stepping stone and a good building block to have. Going the whole hog for the Champions League for next season, as much as obviously everybody says you're going to be in it to win it and all of that stuff, it will only heap more pressure onto Poch when things begin to fail. The Europa League is a very big opportunity in which he can play some of his younger players, they can build up some more experience, and they can build up themselves as a team and as a unit. I think it's massive for Chelsea, this, and I think they've achieved exactly what was set out for them at the beginning of the campaign. So, fair play to Chelsea. Next up, Tottenham. I'm going to move them into the B tier. Now, this may be controversial, the B tier for Spurs, but my argument is I had no expectations of Spurs going into this season. No expectations whatsoever, because I didn't know what to expect. I did not know what to expect of Spurs this season. No idea what to expect of Ange Postecoglou. No idea what to expect of a Spurs side who just lost Harry Kane. But yet, here they are in 5th position, and I've got Europa League football for the next campaign. My only argument for Spurs' season this year has been take the domestic cup seriously. It started off really well for Spurs, and then obviously died down toward the end. I get that. But at the same time, Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither was Ange Postecoglou's side. Give him time. give him the right money to go out and buy the right players for his system, for his very specific system, which he has shown no sign of adapting, by the way. And maybe, just maybe, Spurs may be onto something special. In terms of winning a trophy, maybe not. But in terms of being on a brilliant journey, which, of playing attractive football, maybe. Well, more than likely. Postecoglou's played some very good football, some very attractive, entertaining football this season. I cannot deny that. My only issue with the guy is that he doesn't adapt. And in order to be a top-level coach and a top-level manager in this day and age in the Premier League, you need to show signs of adapting and being flexible. And that's not exactly what his strong suit is. For me, 5th place, it's a good building block. It's a very good platform to build upon for next season. To say that this is Postecoglou's first season in the Premier League, a 5th place finish is nothing to be sniffed at whatsoever. But with the way that they've been performing in recent weeks, if he is to continue to be stubborn, if the players are continuing to maybe be a bit inconsistent, if Daniel Levy's not prepared to give him what he wants, if the recruitment is off in any way, shape or form this summer, they will drop off again. They can't let that happen. They can't let that happen. Postecoglou's saying all the right stuff, he's doing all the right things, but I tell you what, his smile and his charisma has certainly seen better days from the end of the season in comparison to what he was like at the beginning of the season. In the beginning, he was happy, he was different, it was a bit of fresh air, and now he seems to have finally woken up. The bubble seems to have burst, and he seems to have seen Tottenham for what it kind of is. Whether or not he decides to stick it out or not, whether or not Daniel Levy will allow him to stick it out and maybe try and put things right both in and outside of the club, as he so put it after the loss to Manchester City last week, I don't know. Interesting times lie ahead for Spurs. Europa League football will do them a world of good, and like I say, I think for next season they certainly need to take the domestic cups more seriously. The Europa League, sign a couple of decent players here and there, and you know what? They could be strong favourites for that competition. They could be strong favourites, you never know. Next up, Aston Villa, and they are going into the A-star tier because they have had a phenomenal and historic Premier League season in which they've achieved Champions League football for the first time in, I think, over 40 years. I think someone will obviously correct me in the comment section, I'm sure. But I think I'm right in saying in over 40 years, Champions League football will be returning to Villa Park for next season. A fantastic achievement by Unai Emery's side. Look, he's been brilliant. Unai Emery's been absolutely brilliant. And I think the players he's got playing for him right now have been brilliant. I think Ollie Watkins has been outstanding all season. So consistent, and his goal contributions obviously reflect that. It's a shame he didn't kind of get any sort of acknowledgement or achievement or accolade towards the end of the campaign. But I think maybe, Champions League football for next season is not necessarily a bad consolation prize, is it, Mr. Watkins? Leon Bailey's been brilliant. I think Moussa Diaby's been an inspired signing. I think the midfield of the likes of John McGinn and Douglas Luiz have been solid and consistent as ever. I think the backline's been pretty solid. I think Emi Martinez in goal has been outstanding. Yeah, I really cannot pick fault with anything and everything to do with Villa, really. Yeah, there are a few results here and there which don't exactly make for great reading. I think they lost to Newcastle on the opening day of the season by 5-1. They lost on the end of the season 5-0 to Crystal Palace. So, yeah, there are a few results here and there. But, doing the double over Arsenal, picking up wins here and there to really bolster their top 4 ambitions, securing top 4 itself. Outstanding work by Unai Emery's side. Absolutely outstanding work. Fair play, fair credit to them. Do I expect them to drop off a little bit next season? Of course. I don't expect them to maintain their top 4 position for the next campaign, but I think they'll enjoy being in the Champions League for what it is, and I think that they may start to look at maybe putting together maybe a decent cup run or something. So Europa League football Champions League football is back at Villa Park. It should be a consistent challenge now for Villa to get back into the some form of European football, and the Champions League should obviously be at the pinnacle of that. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Aston Villa going forward and with Unai Emery. But I am very much looking forward to seeing how that pans out. Next up, Liverpool in third. I'm going with C. I'm going with C. It could be higher, it could be lower. The reason I'm going with C is because Liverpool achieved exactly what was set out of them at the beginning of the season. No one was expecting them really to put on a title challenge. Everybody was expecting them to maybe go for a cup. Europa League, definitely. But mainly, it was down to them getting back into Champions League football, considering the previous campaign was an absolute train wreck. They achieved that. They got back into it. The reason it's not any higher is because of course, the end of season, the collapse that has happened with this side. I know a lot of injuries have happened. I know a lot of injuries have hindered the squad at various points this season. And I know there's been a lot of games played by Liverpool. But at the same time, no excuses. And that's how much I hold them in high regard and high standard. They ultimately buckled under the pressure towards the end. They ultimately ran out of steam towards the end of the season, and that's why we failed on multiple fronts. That's why we didn't beat United in the FA Cup. That's why we didn't beat Atalanta in the Europa League, and that's why we lost to the likes of Crystal Palace and Everton to really put the final nails in our coffin, basically, for the season. And it's very sad because obviously yesterday was a very emotional day. Jurgen Klopp's final day managing Liverpool before he goes off into the sunset. He should have been playing for more on that day. And yes, Liverpool won. Yes, it was a lovely atmosphere. It was a very emotional atmosphere. And all the tributes and everything were beautiful to watch from a Liverpool fan's point of view. But at the same time, yeah, we should have been playing for more, and we only have ourselves to blame for that. So unfortunately, it wasn't to be this season for Liverpool any more so than a Carabao Cup. But goodbye, danke to Jurgen Klopp for everything. Thank you for everything. Now we welcome in Arne Slot. That's another topic for another day. Let's leave it at that for now. Next up, Arsenal. Arsenal. I'm going to go with A. I'm going to go with A for Arsenal. They couldn't have done much better this season. And I speak on that from experience of a Liverpool fan who knows exactly what it's like to constantly go toe-to-toe with Manchester City, pray each and every single week that they drop points, and ultimately City, by hook or by crook, by some way, shape or form, managed to pull off a win that ultimately is a sucker punch to your team and obviously helps them gain 3 more points towards a Premier League title. Yes, you can nitpick on Arsenal. You can go to games like the home and away games against Aston Villa and say they should have done more. You can go to the game against Fulham, maybe the games against Fulham, and say they should have done more. You could go to the game against West Ham and say they should have done more. The game against Liverpool at Anfield and say they should have done more. The game against Manchester City and say they should have done more. But the fact of the matter is they did everything that they could. And the margin of error has become so thin because of how the likes of Manchester City in particular, of course, and of course Liverpool in previous years as well, have raised the bar so high in terms of points accumulation and winning the Premier League on so many points, and obviously having the fewest losses possible and the fewest draws possible. It's unfortunate for Arsenal, especially after spending so much money in the summer transfer window. 105 million on Declan Rice, Jurriën Timber, who was unfortunately injured for the majority of the season, 65 million on Kai Havertz, who a lot of people laughed at the beginning of the campaign, but of course turned out to actually be a solid enough signing to help Arsenal spearhead towards a title charge. Arsenal have got a lot to look back on and be proud of this season. They were just unfortunately beaten by a slightly better squad. And those you just have to take on the chin, unfortunately. As a Liverpool fan, I know better than anyone. Just saying. I'm just saying, I know better than anyone on that level and on that front. So, yeah. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. And, you know, Arsenal have to go again next season. And the big question for Arsenal is, can they go again next season? Of course, there's a massive surge in mentality that goes with the territory of being title contenders, not just for one season, but for 2 and 3. It's going to be big. There needs to be some recruitment. There needs to be some improvement on the squad, of course. But they're getting there, Arsenal. They are getting there. Whether or not they'll achieve it, especially while Pep Guardiola is still here, remains to be seen. Could they go again for next season? Only time will tell. And trust me, again, as a Liverpool fan that knows what it's like to go toe-to-toe with Manchester City and even see my team drop off in certain seasons against City, we know what it's like. So before certain Arsenal fans get too arrogant and too big-headed, you're in our position that we were in a few years ago. Just saying. And finally, of course, Manchester City, A-star. Achieved exactly what they were supposed to this season. A lot of people had them winning the Premier League title, so they achieved exactly what they were supposed to. But the mental capacity to go 4 in 4 is unbelievable, is phenomenal. And yeah, I just think that they've been absolutely phenomenal this season. I truly think they've been absolutely incredible. Certainly lucky at certain times. I don't think anybody can necessarily deny that. Certainly got a bit of the rub of the green, a bit of luck here and there. And I think there were a few times across the season where a lot of people were looking at City and going, this isn't exactly the City of old. This isn't exactly the same City team as the previous years gone by. And yet they still finish on 91 points and with a Premier League title and with the opportunity, of course, to win an FA Cup as well. And that is where they could obviously do a domestic double and be another successful season in the life of Manchester City and Pep Guardiola. And rival fans can only sit back and watch and hope and pray and have their fingers and toes crossed that 115 charges pulls through and that eventually they get found guilty of those charges to make the past 10 to 15 years of any City accomplishments completely meaningless. Whether that will happen or not remains to be seen. Whether or not we'll get an answer in our lifetimes to whether or not they are guilty of those 115 charges remains to be seen. So we have to take it for what it is right now and just say congratulations to Manchester City on yet another Premier League title triumph. Premier League title overall, and for the 4th Premier League title in a row. Fantastic, phenomenal, and rightfully so. Winners, yeah, truly, truly outstanding. Look, I know this was a lengthy video, but I wanted to get through the whole 20 teams. Thanks everyone for stopping by and listening. If you managed to get this far, I really do appreciate it. But these are, of course, the thoughts, comments, opinions, predictions, feelings, whatever you want to call it, of this guy. I want to know what you guys think. What do you make of any and every team that I've talked about? What do you make of the tier system? Do you agree with my thoughts and comments? Do you not necessarily agree? I'd love to know your thoughts, your comments, opinions, predictions, feelings, whatever you want to call it, down below in the comment section on anything and everything that I've talked about in this video in regards to the Premier League review for the 2023-24 season. Otherwise, hit the like button on the way out if you enjoy the video. Subscribe if you're new and want to see more content like this. Both things are always incredibly greatly appreciated. Get involved in the comment section. Let me know your, like I say, anything and everything that you want to talk about would be great to hear from you all. Yeah, otherwise, thank you all so much for watching and listening. I've been Fletch. This has been another Fletch Talks video, and I will soon speak to you all again soon in another video or live stream or whatever it may be. Cheers, guys. I know this has been a long one, so thank you very much for taking the time out to watch and obviously for sticking by. Lots more content to come as we wrap up the season, so stay tuned for that. We've got Team of the Season. We've got obviously an FA Cup preview to look forward to later on this week as well. Champions League final is obviously going to be next week at some point. So, yeah, we've got a lot to wrap up the season with. We've got a lot to look forward to. And I'm hoping there'll be some tasty and very interesting transfer rumours to talk about and to gossip about, as well as maybe the managerial merry-go-round going around once again. And obviously we've got European Championship build-up. So it's all happening and it's all taking place. So, like I say, feel free to subscribe if you are new. Would love that from you people. Would be very much appreciated, as always. Thanks, guys, for watching and listening. I've been Fletch. This has been another Fletch Talks video. I'll see you speak to you all again soon in another video or live stream or whatever it may be. Cheers, guys. Thanks for watching. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your night. Speak to you all again very soon.